Welcome to Perimenopausal Athletes and Beyond, a masterclass series where we bring together doctors, physiotherapists, coaches, functional medicine experts, functional nutritionists. The list goes on. I am thrilled to be bringing to you a physiotherapist, Barbara Bialokoz. What is the Bialokoz? What is the history of that?
It's an old Polish name.
An old Polish name.
Yeah.
Barbara grew up in Oxford, England. She has come to our beautiful city of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And yes, all things cycling, sport, specialization, helping people manage, prevent, manage, deal with injury, get people going again. And what am I missing? There, you have specializations within your physiotherapy practice as well. And one of those, and what we're going to be talking today about, is bike fitting.
Yes.
And it
fits well in Victoria, since the whole of the population these days seems to be on a bicycle. So we have a wonderful population of active cyclists to work with.
Yes, we live in a city where we love to commute, cruise, cyclocross, road race, triathlon. We have it all. So you have a huge population to serve serve us all. And what we're going to talk about specifically, and did I miss anything? Do you want me to add any other things about where you come from or what it is you do before we dive into the questions?
No, just perhaps, I've been a physiotherapist for 27 years, and I started working with injured cyclists. And what I discovered was the cyclists would come in with some back pain or knee pain, and I'd treat that injury, that joint, and then they'd go back off onto their bicycle and they'd re-injure themselves. So eventually I just started saying, could you bring your bike in? And so we started just looking at people on their bicycles, and then that morphed into a whole system and process that now takes 2 to 3 hours of visualization, mapping. So it becomes very detailed, and now we can actually set them up nicely on the bike so that I can treat the injury, they can wander off and not re-injure themselves. So that's really where it all came together.
Right. Yeah. And I think to that point is the very first point that we can talk about, is like how unbelievably important it is to get a proper bike fit for your body. And and so, okay. And this is at any age, at any time in your life. And but are there any changes? So here we are, the audience listening to this is in perimenopause and beyond, female athletes. Is there a time in our lives that it's more important, or is it because, what's happening in our bodies is changing? How does bike fitting, how does an idea of something that's static or relatively static and, on a bike, fixed bike, change for us as we change?
Yeah, that's a good question. And fortunately, most people realize these days that a bike fit is an important part of their activity. But it's first of all, it's not particularly static. And I think when we think of gymnastics and tennis, that people are running around and moving and very flexible. But then we think of cycling and we think, well, we're just sitting there. And when people come in to see us, probably the most common thing that they say afterwards is, wow, did I learn a lot? And that sort of goes to reflect the fact that when we learn to ride a bicycle, it's essentially, your parent sticks you on a bike, pushes you down the hill and says, don't forget the brakes, and, pedal faster. So here we are at this stage of life, and we really haven't had any instruction whatsoever, most of us. And we've decided, okay, now I'm going to buy myself that nice bike because I think I deserve it. And I'm signing myself up for these wonderful activities and I want to go a little bit faster. And I have my beautiful ASOS outfit. And then I get on the bike and realize, wow, this isn't working out terribly well. And so most people will do some research and they'll do some measurements and they'll try and fit themselves on the bike. And that usually ends up with them in here. And so then we have to talk about, how can we get you in this position? And so I always, ask people, what are the key elements to getting into an efficient, fast position on a bike? And so they often come up with a few ideas. And the number one, I have three rules. And the first one is you have to be comfortable on the bike. The second one, do you do hill repeats or do you stretch your calves or what do you do? Well, the second one is also you have to be comfortable on the bike. And you can probably guess what the third one is. It's comfortable on the bike. So really, when you look at somebody and you get an athlete, maybe a master's athlete, and you're trying to get them into, for example, a really nice aerodynamic position because they're doing, the World Masters time trial, and you calculate, you measure, and you shave everything, and you put them in the skin suit and the teardrop helmet, and they're all kitted out, put them in a wind tunnel, and mathematically they're in the perfect position, but there's all this turbulence and they're moving around, and you turn the thing off, you say, what the heck's going on in there? And they're like, I can't hold this position, it's just too uncomfortable.
Right.
So really, you can do those measurements and you can figure out, I'm this and that, but mathematically it doesn't work. You have to, and all professional bike fitters know this, the most aerodynamic, for example, most aerodynamic position is the most comfortable position. Secondly, if you're not comfortable, we know you're getting injured. And, by this, as we get older, we know, oh gosh, here comes that old back injury, or, it starts to get painful. And so, if we're feeling that, we know it's not good. And thirdly, I think almost most importantly, if we're not comfortable on this bike that we just bought, it's going to end up just drying clothes in the garage, and you're not even want to get, you don't want to get on it because it's so bloody awful. So, so those are really, your three pillars. Is you have to be comfortable for efficiency, for injury prevention, and just for pure pleasure. As we get older, certainly, we know that in the words of one of my colleagues, we are cement waiting to harden. And so we really have to address that flexibility. And as you say, you think, cycling is a static position. Well, yes and no. The upper extremity can be fairly static, but your lower extremity, if you think what you have to do, we have to bend forward and then we have to bring our knees up to our chest. And if we've got a back issue, or if we start tightening up in the hips, then we're doing that very poorly. And actually what happens as we tighten, and to be honest with you, 9 people out of 10 that come in here cannot touch their toes, keeping their knees straight. Like the forward flexion, I'll grade them like a 4 out of 10, a 2 out of 10, and the odd one will come in nice and flexible. And you need that flexibility. And I actually had a word with Phil Burt, who's an Olympic, a British physio, and I said, hey, Phil, what do you think about stretching? And what do you think about yoga for cyclists? And he ummed and ahed and looked at me and said, oh, yes, organized stretching, very, very good idea. So to tell people, they come in and they say, yeah, no, I know, I've got to lose weight and I've got to stretch. It's this midlife thing. Well, I'm not going to tell you either. What I am going to tell you, though, is when you're on a bicycle and your feet are attached to pedals, they have to make a circle. And if something is tight as it comes up, and your knees coming up towards your chest, if your glutes are tight, if your hamstrings are tight, it actually creates some beautiful resistance, which you don't want, some resistance in the system. Mm-hmm. So it's really like biking with flat tires. Your body's actually fighting, it's top dead center, and you're fighting against yourself. And we've measured that resistance with our pressure mapping. And that resistance can be up to 50 watts. So wow. 50 watts, that usually resonates. So people who are training, and as we get older, we have to recover a lot more. So we have to spend, just as much time recovering off the bike, stretching as we do on the bike. So if we can gain 50 watts, and I have a 50-watt stretch that I'll give people, that's amazing. So that usually motivates people to actually do some stretching. The other reason there are many reasons to stretch, but also I talk about the symmetry of cycling, and it's a symmetrical activity, hopefully. And so when you're stretching, you want to look at side to side, and we do have injuries that we've had for when we played soccer as teenagers and knees and things. And so we tend to become a little bit asymmetrical. So we need to watch that. And just simply by going through a nice stretching routine, yin yoga, absolutely brilliant for cyclists. Up the hips, gets that 50 watts fired up. I usually recommend that. So yeah, those are probably the most important things. What I also see is a lot of people who come in with knee replacements, hip replacements, and these are people in their 40s and 50s, who've had fairly robust active lives. And again, we have to adapt the bike to fit them. We can't stick someone on a bike and say, yeah, you're going to get used to that. Well, you're not going to get used to that. We don't adapt. We just get injured. And so we really have to look at all those positions and all the things that we can change, the crank length, the seat height, et cetera, and really get it to fit people with those.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I think that, I know your point number 1, 2, and 3 were, you should be comfortable on the bike, but I think it's so relevant. Like it's so important to continue to put out there. And one thing I have, athletes that ask me are just like, yeah, but is it supposed to still be comfortable after I want to do a 70.3 and which requires a 90-kilometer bike ride. Yeah. When is it do we get uncomfortable on a bike? Is there a point that we should be?
We do. There's definitely, good pain and bad pain. And anytime you're in a fixed position, something's going to feel a bit off. I think that was a really good question. And so we think about, for example, muscle groups, what's working hard on a bicycle, and obviously being in a fixed flex position, your back is probably you're going to feel that, but once you get up and get moving, then that should go away right away. What we don't want is joint pain, tendon pain. We don't want numbness, tingling, any neurological, because those really indicate that a nerve is getting compressed. And we know that can be permanent damage. And that's, with the saddle issues. The very first conference I went to in London a long time ago, there were 70 men and myself. And that's just a reflection of the bike industry, is that it's really dominated by men. Fair enough, I suppose, in those days, but things have changed now. And the first speaker got up, and the first thing he said was erectile dysfunction. I thought, oh my God, great. Anyhow, but that's nerve damage, and that's nerve issue, and those are the issues. That's bad pain. Good pain, you lie on the couch, your quads. What are the big muscles that work in cycling? Obviously the quads. The next biggest muscle are your glutes, and then your calf muscles. Yeah. And your hamstrings, your hip flexors, 1%. You should not feel your hip flexors after a bike ride. So big muscle groups, and the pain should, if you do have a little bit of back pain, there are a few exercises you can do to correct that, but that should go away. So yeah, good pain is muscle pain.
Right. So I think that's okay. So we know that we can find there's a difference between discomfort because you've been sitting and you've been working in a position. And then when we get off, we can stretch, we can move, we can get limber again, we get going. Yeah, joint, you've mentioned, okay, so one of my really the question is, are there sex differences that we should be looking for? Like you talked about hip, you mentioned you brought in saddles, you just mentioned, what are some of those things that we need to, as female athletes in particular, need to think about how our shape is different? And
yeah. Well, this might be a good moment to bring in the whole female pelvis. Obviously that's I just brought this along.
Of your friend.
So obviously, functionally, we know the difference between the male and female pelvis. So in terms of structurally, that goes along with function. And so structurally, the female pelvis is going to be broader. It's going to be wider.
Right.
And it's going to be shallower. generally. And so what happens is everybody talks about the sit bones. So the sit bones are your ischial tuberosities. So when we're sitting in a chair and we lean forward a bit, we should be able to feel those two bony bits of the pelvis contacting the chair. So on a bicycle, our first initial point of contact and where we're going to get the most stability, and this is so important for women because we tend to be way more flexible, and it's really stability and strength compared to the men. Men are much stiffer. They have generally much poorer hip flexibility. They usually come in with back pain. Whereas the women, it's different. It's hands, knees, or it's usually a saddle issue, although men, that's also. But so for the women's pelvis, so we're looking at the widest sit bones. This is our primary point of contact. These need to be on the bike seat. So essentially, you have to have the sit bones have to be on the seat. We do pressure mapping. So we have a picture of what this looks like. We put a pressure map on the seat, we put people on it, and we can see exactly what's going on. It's the MRI of bike fitting. It gives us so much information. The amount of times we see the women are sitting on the tip of the saddle. So the other difference, so we've got these wide sit bones. We also have this pubic arch, which is a lot shallower for women, which means there's a lot less room to negotiate. So you're going to get compression of the soft tissue an awful lot faster. For women, wider sit bones. So it's incredibly important that you go and get them measured. And so you have an idea of the width of the saddle. Saddles come in different widths, usually 143, 155, 164, 168. You need to have the right width because you need that initial point of contact has to be stable. In the words of another bike fitter, you cannot fire a cannon from a canoe. You have to be stable. The amount of people that we've seen with the pressure mapping that have got one sit bone on the seat. I had one person who came in, I took their bike and they said, please, you can do anything to the bike, don't move the saddle. And I looked at the saddle and it was actually rotated to a 15-degree angle. And I thought, okay, this person is probably really asymmetrical, there's something going on. Well, they weren't. And I was really curious. And we got the person on the bike. And then what we realized was they had been told that they had a certain width of pelvis and they were sold a bike seat of that width. And when they put it on, the only way they could actually get contact with their two sit bones is if they had it slightly diagonally, and then they could find it. So the seat was too narrow. And so they were, if it was straight on, they were sitting like that, which is incredibly useless and uncomfortable. And so usually people will end up just sitting on one sit bone. So you'll see this pressure map where they're like this. And that is non-optimal loading. That is not comfortable and it's not efficient. So essentially, your bike shop will have a little pad that you can sit on if that's what you want to do. And then you can navigate the massive choice of seats. The other thing that's unbelievably important is the cutout. Bike seats we used to have, everybody would come in on an apparition that looked like this. And it was horrible. They were narrow, no cutout. They had this nasty curve, which fits perfectly where you don't want it. So you'd end up sitting like this. So squishing all the soft tissue, no bony contact. It was just a nightmare. Finally, Specialized put lots of money into their research and they developed some fantastic seats. One of which was the Roman Eva. We were putting everybody on it. It had a beautiful profile, it had a cutout, it came in fantastic widths. And of course, consistent with the bike industry, they stopped making them. So there was a perfect seat. And they started making actually some really nice women's seats, the Aura. And we knew when a woman came in, we thought, 9 times out of 10, this is going to be this. They sit on, they go, oh my God, this is amazing. And of course, they start making those as well. So, it's this industry that's really peculiar. So, yeah, so for women, you have to get the bony contact. A lot of people come in, particularly women, I'm afraid, and they'll get these huge pads on the seat to make it more comfortable. If your seat is too cushy, then you just squish into it because the pelvis, it actually spreads as we weight bear, as we're sitting, it actually spreads, so it gets even wider. And so then again, you get this soft tissue compression, which is not good. So you need to get a saddle that fits properly. Most bike shops are great letting you try the seats, bringing them back. The problem also with finding the right seat, you have to be set up correctly on the bike. If it's the wrong angle, if it's too far back or forward or high or low, it's also not going to work for you. So often we will have people with good seats and they can't get comfortable and they're just in the wrong place. It's a very complicated process, and we have a system where we start systematically through starting with a physio assessment where I look at the body and say, what are we putting on the bike? Do we have leg length discrepancies? How flexible are you? You know, is that knee that you wrecked when you were, you know, playing soccer, does that move? And that ankle that you've sprained 10 times, does that move? Do we need to change, you know, do we need to compensate for those things to get you moving and comfortable? But really the saddle is, you have to start, if you can't get comfortable on the seat, then it's a bit hopeless. The other thing we need to do, because as females we tend to be more flexible, we want to try and we tend to lock our lumbar spine up by going into an anterior pelvic tilt. So when we go into an anterior pelvic tilt, we're tipping forward, and again we're bringing that soft tissue into contact with the seat. Hence we do need the cutout. That's also the reason why we tend to like a seat with a bit of a nice profile that we can roll into. Let's see if I got one here. Some seats are dead flat. Here's this was the old, this was an old, they stopped making, oh, this is a flat one as well. Just a sec, sorry. This one's got a little bit of a profile. Where are my profile seats gone? Oh, here we go. This is the profile. This is what we call a profile. So it's got this nice swoop. So you can imagine that you can sit on the back of this and roll forward. And there's lots of room, and there's a big cutout, lots of room for soft tissue. You can get into that nice anterior pelvic tilt. You can lock your lumbar spine into a really happy, solid position. And that way we also engage our glutes. When we sit upright, the glutes are not engaged. When we roll forward, we engage our glutes, which is our second largest muscle group that we need to use.
Be powerful, yeah.
Makes us more efficient. So we're stable and we're functionally more efficient. The other thing it does, when we can roll forward, we can also, the glutes are a lumbar extensor, so it unloads our hands. So we see a lot of people pedaling along, and the most common problem for women is upper extremity neck pain and hand numbness, and they've got a lot of pressure on their hands, and the classic, if the seat's uncomfortable, they're doing this.
Right.
And so get the seat right and say, okay, roll forward, and they roll forward, and all of a sudden the elbows bend, and there's much less pressure on the hands, and so the glutes act as a lumbar extensor. And just help support and take the weight off our hands.
Wow. So, okay, you've covered so much there. So let me try to just summarize. So all of this is coming into a point that we need to get comfortable. In order for us to get comfortable, we have to understand that our bodies are different in terms of a physiology that an industry hasn't necessarily caught up with or maintained in some cases.
At least.
Yeah. Which is so disappointing for us, because we do need to have some consideration, particularly, and you've gone through the saddles and making sure that that's cut out, to know flexibility. I mean, you're very much you have a holistic approach, an individualized approach to the bike fitting, in which, as a person, and I love this, I love the way you said it. You said that we're going to fit, the bike is going to fit you. You're not going to fit the bike.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
I say that the same thing with my plan. You're not going to fit the plan. The plan is going to fit you. So I resonate.
You know, the worst thing, the sentence that when people walk in with a bike, they say, it was a really good deal. Like, oh no. And they will have bought some bike from, maybe some pro, and it will be slammed down in the front and it will be way too big, or, oh, and I look at it and I go, oh no, just take it back.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a really good, I mean, it's a great lead into a question that I have then is, if we've really, a lot of us have suffered quite a bit and not understood how to be comfortable on a bike. And therefore we kind of have like thrown it out and just say like, yeah, but it's not for me. And
Right.
do we first then say, okay, well, let's understand our bodies and go to a professional like yourself that really takes it's a whole other process. I mean, we have an interview in which we have a very traditional bike fitting experience. You get some measurements, you go on the bike, you do this, that maybe that works for many people.
That's a bike sizing. That's a bike sizing.
It's a bike sizing. And so as we get more, if you're struggling at all, or even if you are really wanting to do something big and maximize the power, maximize whatever it is that you're trying to do and just be really comfortable, then first go to you, really understand what you need in a bike, and then go and buy the bike is almost what it is, what you're suggesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people come in, they haven't even bought a bike. They'll have some ideas. They'll know, a price point, a style, and they'll say, I'm looking at this and this. And then I'll take a look at them. We'll bring them in the studio here and go through the process, and we'll put the different bikes measurements of the different styles, whatever they're looking at, and see what works and what doesn't work for them. I mean, for women are not just small men. We have different size. With anthropometric, we're different. We have short torsos, long legs. Most have, I've got big hands, but most have smaller hands. We need a shorter reach. We need compact bars. We need shorter cranks. So when someone also, a good deal, the other one is, oh, I got it from my husband or my boyfriend or my son. You think, oh, it's going to be probably way too long in the front. It'll have one of these hideous men's seats on. And they'll say, well, it's not bad. And then we'll start the mapping, and they'll look and go, well, actually, you know what, that seat's awful. And that's another thing that women, they put themselves at the very bottom of everything. We get the bikes last, we get to train last, because we have to make sure everybody else is,
sorted.
And then it's like, oh, I got 10 minutes. Oh, I'm just going to do a quick thingy. And so, we need to take care of ourselves. And that's, that's so important. And consider that we are very, very different on, just.
Yeah. Well, this has been incredibly informative. I think I've really enjoyed just listening and hearing what you have to say. And I hope that we all have been able to take out, the real key points and understanding. I mean, it is a lot of education that you're providing to people, and most importantly, that you can find, if for many female athletes that have been runners, or, there's some challenges as we come into perimenopause, that running, some people let it go, and not that we have to let it go. That's not what I'm saying, but there are other sports that might be a bit more supportive or easier to maintain and cross train using as well.
Yeah, incredibly important. And I think for when I look at young athletes, and sometimes I'll do a little talk with a group of just young track cyclists and boys and girls, and the very thing that we start with is assessing their flexibility, and they're all laughing and looking, and we're doing this flexibility test, and then I'll line them up and say, okay, most flexible, least flexible. The most flexible are always the girls, and it goes to the least flexible are the boys. And then I say, okay, who stretches? And all the girls put their arms up. And who does strengthening? And all the boys put their arms up. And I say, no, you have to switch that around. Girls, you need stability and strength. Boys, get stretching, because when you're 50, 55, you're going to be a 2 out of 10 touching your knees. And girls, you need to strengthen. You need to cross train. You need to do some weightlifting. You need to get stable.
Yeah.
just to protect our joints. And
Oh, I'm so glad you're getting that message out to them as well. I know that we're working really hard on so many levels.
yeah, no,
You know, with
it's
the,
super
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Super
All
interesting.
right. So I have a few rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Indeed.
All right. Give
Yes.
us one moment of courage.
Oh, yes. It was actually fairly recently, and don't laugh because I'm from Oxford, England. I'm a city girl, but I love gravel riding. I've got this amazing gravel bike that I absolutely love. And so we do the Great Trail. And so a friend of mine came from Vancouver and we biked over the Great Trail. So, you're out there on your own, this is big for me. And so when we go over, we go into Shawnigan Lake and we meet, her husband is there. And she looks at me, she says, well, are you going to just take the Brentwood ferry or are you going to bike over the Mallet Hat on the road? I said, no, you know what? I am going to go on my own all the way back on this great trail. And not only it's a pretty epic ride, but there are, I was really scared actually. And I was so proud of myself when I got back. I thought, I did that on my own. And I was actually too exhausted to be terrified of, animals and things like that. But that was my that was my moment, my proud moment.
Oh my goodness. There's many people that don't quite understand how epic that journey that you just took is. But let me tell you, she was in a wild country. She was on a very difficult trail that is long. And I personally have not yet done it, but I do know many people who have. And exhaustion is a common description by the end of it. So congratulations.
It's got some 20% grades on it. It's pretty epic.
It's super.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Awesome.
Crew everywhere.
Oh, so neat. Well, you know what you can do. Give us one moment of one thing that you're curious about right now.
Yeah, I'm actually, this is another fairly personal thing. Is as we get older, we realize that we're not necessarily constrained by expectations of other people, and that really, we can say no to things, and we can really decide, what do I want to do, and actually, no, I'm just going to relax, and I'm not going to go and do that, as opposed to when we're younger, where we really feel we have to fit in with a group and fit in with our peers. And I'm just curious because I find myself getting much calmer and enjoying things a lot more, and being able to sit back and say, hey, you know what, I'm actually not going to run around and do a million things. And I'm curious of that journey, that when I'm 99, I will be the most mellow, sitting cross-legged and just smiling. And I'm just curious, that journey I think is really interesting, and yeah, see where that goes.
Oh, I love it. Yes. Give us one thing that you're grateful for right now.
I don't know whether I can really narrow it down. I think I'm grateful for living in the most amazing city with the most fantastic, interesting, fun people, and just lifestyle here is absolutely incredible. And I'm just very, very grateful for where I live and the people I'm surrounded with.
Yeah.
Thank you, Victoria.
We have a gorgeous home. I'm so glad that you love it here, as do I. All right, I'm going to give you the last word to this session. So is there anything that you want to leave our audience with before we say goodbye?
Yeah, well, I hope everybody can go out and really enjoy and embrace the outdoors, and love what they do, and do it for themselves, and maybe set some goals, maybe not, but just go and enjoy being active and healthy. And that's such a wonderful lifestyle. And don't be too hard on yourselves. Like it's short.
Love it.